Captain Yoon-ho sat in his command chair watching the stars drift past the viewing window. The bridge of the Harmony's edge was quiet tonight, just like every night for the past 3,000 years. Peace was good for the galaxy, but it made for boring patrol duty. "Another quiet sector report, Captain," said Lieutenant Hee-jin from her station. "No conflicts, no distress signals, no unusual activity anywhere in the outer rim." Yoon-ho nodded and signed the digital report. 3,000 years without a single major war. The history books called it the Great Peace, and every child in the galaxy learned about it in school. But what they didn't learn was why the peace had lasted so long. Down in the archives deep below Proxima Station, Commander Jin-A was having trouble sleeping again. She often came to the restricted files section late at night when the other staff had gone home. The ancient computers hummed quietly in the darkness as she pulled up the forbidden records. There it was again. The Sol system. The third planet, called Earth. The species called humans. Jin-A had read these files hundreds of times, but they still made her nervous. The reports were old, some dating back over 3,000 years. They told stories that seemed impossible. Humans who turned mining ships into weapons. Humans who fought 3 enemies at once and somehow won. Humans who never surrendered, even when they were completely outnumbered. Unpredictable combat behavior, one report said. Uses civilian equipment as military hardware. Converts agricultural tools into explosive devices. Recommendation: avoid engagement. Another file was even more disturbing. Human prisoners refuse to provide information even under extreme interrogation. Subject died rather than reveal military secrets. Note: all human captives display this behavior. But the strangest part was how the war had ended. The humans had just stopped. No surrender, no peace treaty, no final battle. One day they were fighting across 6 star systems, and the next day all their ships went home to Earth. Then nothing. Complete silence for 3,000 years. Ginny closed the files and walked to the observation deck. Through the thick glass, she could see thousands of ships moving peacefully through space. Cargo vessels, passenger liners, diplomatic shuttles. All different species working together in harmony. But not humans. Never humans. On the other side of the station, Council Leader Timon was finishing his evening meal when his aide brought him the monthly security briefing. It was the same as always. No threats, no conflicts, no problems anywhere in civilized space. "What about the Sol prohibition?" Timon asked, as he did every month. "Still in effect, sir. No ships have approached the system. The automated warning. Boys are functioning normally." Timon nodded. The Sol prohibition was the galaxy's most important law, even though most people didn't know it existed. No ship could enter the Sol system. No communication with Earth was allowed. The third planet was marked as forbidden on every star chart. The older council members remembered why. They had heard the stories from their grandparents about the human wars, about species that had tried to conquer human worlds and lost entire fleets, about the desperate creativity of human fighters who turned anything into a weapon. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," one ancient report had said. "Even when winning is impossible, they keep fighting. Recommend extreme caution." But the most frightening thing wasn't how humans fought. It was how they thought. Human military tactics made no sense to other species. They would sacrifice important positions to save a few soldiers. They would attack when they should retreat. They would help enemies who had surrendered. Humans display irrational loyalty to individual unit members, a military analysis had concluded. This makes their behavior unpredictable and their morale impossible to break. The war had cost everyone too much. 3 major species had lost their homeworlds. Dozens of colonies had been destroyed. The economy of half the galaxy had collapsed. When the humans finally went silent, everyone agreed it was better to leave them alone. Young people today didn't understand. They saw the empty space around, Sol on their star maps, and asked why such a rich system was off limits. The older generation would just say it was for everyone's safety and change the subject. But Jin-A knew the truth. The Great Peace existed because of fear. Fear of what might happen if the humans woke up again. Fear of starting another war that could destroy everything they had built. She looked out at the peaceful ships and wondered how long it could last. Somewhere out there, on the third planet of a forbidden star system, an entire species was living in silence. Were they dead? Were they planning? Were they just waiting? The automated warning buoys around Sol had been broadcasting the same message for 3,000 years. This system is under galactic prohibition. Any approach will be considered an act of war. But no one had ever tested what would happen if someone ignored the warning. No one wanted to find out what would happen if Earth stopped being silent. The Great Peace was perfect, as long as the humans stayed asleep. But Ginny had a terrible feeling that nothing stayed asleep forever. Mining executive Dongmin stared at the red numbers on his screen and felt his stomach drop. His company was 3 months away from complete failure. All the good mining sites were taken by bigger corporations. All the safe asteroid belts had been stripped clean decades ago. "Sir, we need to find new resources fast," said his assistant He-Jin, setting another stack of bills on his desk. "The bank wants their money next month." Dongmin pulled up the star charts on his computer. There had to be something they missed. Some asteroid field that other companies had overlooked. His fingers moved across the screen, checking system after system. Then he saw it. The Sol system. Rich asteroid fields, multiple planets, and according to the mineral scans, more wealth than his company had ever dreamed of. But there was a red warning label across the entire system. "What about this one?" he asked He-Jin. She looked at the screen and went pale. "Sir, that's the Sol prohibition. No one goes there. It's been forbidden for 3,000 years. "But look at these mineral readings," Dongmin said, pointing to the numbers. "We could pay off all our debts with just one good asteroid. And the prohibition is just about the third planet, right? We don't need to go near Earth." He-Jin shook her head. "Sir, my grandfather told me stories about that place. Bad things happen to ships that go to Sol." But Dongmin was desperate. He sent a small survey ship to the edge of the system, just to take a closer look. The pilot, a young man named Jun-Ho, was nervous but needed the money. "Just stay far away from the third planet," Dongmin told him. "We're only interested in the asteroids." Jun-Ho's ship reached the Sol system 3 days later. The asteroid belt was even richer than they had hoped. Rare metals, energy crystals, materials worth more than most planets. And floating in the middle of it all was an ancient space station. "It's old," Jun-Ho reported back. "Really old. Looks like it hasn't been used in centuries. Maybe it's abandoned." The station was called Deep Watch Station 7. It was huge, almost the size of a small moon, but completely dark. No lights, no signals, no signs of life. "If we say the station was a navigation hazard," Dongmin told his crew, "we can claim salvage rights to the whole area. One little accident and we're rich." Jun-Ho didn't like the plan, but he needed the job. He aimed his mining ship at the old station and fired up the cutting lasers. The ancient metal cut like paper. Within minutes, the massive station broke apart and drifted away in pieces. Then the alarm started. On Earth, Dr. So-Young was working in her garden when the emergency sirens began wailing across Neo-Sol. She had never heard that particular sound before. It was the Deep Space Warning System, something that hadn't been used in over 3,000 years. "All citizens report to emergency shelters immediately," the loudspeakers announced. "This is not a drill. Deep Space Monitoring has detected a threat." So-Young ran to the nearest shelter with thousands of other confused people. No one understood what was happening. Earth had been peaceful for so long that most people didn't even know they had a deep space warning system. President Wu Jin appeared on all the screens an hour later. His face was grim, and his voice was shaking slightly. "Citizens of Earth," he began. "1 hour ago, our deep space monitoring station was destroyed by an unknown vessel. For the first time in 3,000 years, we have detected other intelligent life in our solar system." The crowd in the shelter went completely silent. Other life, other intelligent species? But Earth had been alone for so long that it seemed impossible. "Our computers have been analyzing old data files," the president continued. "What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe." So-Young watched, in shock as the president explained what the computers had found. Earth wasn't alone. There was an entire galaxy full of intelligent species. Thousands of different worlds, all connected by trade and communication. and they all knew about Earth. "We have been watched," President Wu Jin said. "For 3,000 years they have known about us while we knew nothing about them. They have monitoring stations around our solar system. They have marked us as forbidden territory on their maps." The crowd began to whisper and murmur. Why would they watch Earth in secret? Why keep humans isolated? But the worst news was yet to come. The computers had found something else in the old files, records of human colonies, established centuries ago before the Great Silence. Worlds with names like New Busan and New Incheon, places where humans had tried to build new homes among the stars. "These colonies still exist," the president said, quietly. "But they are no longer human worlds. Other species have taken them over. They have been mining our former territories for thousands of years." So Young felt anger rising in her chest. Someone had stolen human worlds. Someone had been watching them like animals in a zoo. Someone had kept them ignorant while plundering their heritage. Around the shelter, she could see the same anger on other faces. Earth had spent 3,000 years in peace, thinking they were alone and safe. But they had been prisoners in their own solar system. The president's final words sent chills through the crowd. The galaxy thought Earth was asleep. They thought, "We would never wake up." They were wrong. Captain Minho had never expected to be the first human to leave Earth in 3,000 years. His ship, the Rising Dawn, was built in secret using technology that had been quietly advancing during the long peace. The stealth systems made his vessel invisible to most sensors, and the speed was far beyond what humans had achieved centuries ago. "We're crossing the heliopause now," reported his navigator Yunji, "leaving the Sol system for the first time since the Great Silence." Minho felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Every human on Earth was counting on this mission to find out what was really happening in the galaxy. His orders were simple: stay hidden, gather information, and report back everything he learned. The first alien ship they encountered was a massive cargo vessel near Alpha Centauri. It was 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built, moving slowly between star systems loaded with materials from dozens of different worlds. "Look at the size of that thing," whispered Yunji. "How many species are out there?" Minho activated the passive scanners and began recording everything. The ship's hull was covered in text from multiple languages. Some symbols looked familiar from the old human colony records, but others were completely alien. As they moved deeper into galactic space, the crew of the Rising Dawn discovered a universe far more complex than they had imagined. Trade stations the size of small moons, diplomatic vessels carrying ambassadors between hundreds of different worlds, military patrols keeping peace across vast territories. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Yu Jin from her station, "I'm picking up something that might interest you. There's a mining operation in the Kepler system." Minho knew that name. Kepler had been one of the first human colony attempts back before the Silence. They approached carefully, staying hidden behind a large asteroid. What they saw made Minho's blood run cold. The planet that humans had once called New Busan was covered in massive strip mines. Alien machinery was tearing apart the surface, extracting every valuable mineral. The small human settlement that had once existed there was completely gone, erased like it had never existed. "They're destroying it," Yunji said quietly. "They're taking everything." Yujin was monitoring the alien communications. "Captain, they're calling it Mining World 7 Alpha. There's no mention of humans ever being here. It's like we never existed." They documented everything and moved on to the next system. Former human colony after former human colony had been turned into mining worlds, farming planets, or industrial centers. All signs of human presence had been carefully removed. But the worst discovery came when Yu Jin managed to hack into a galactic database. She spent hours breaking through their security systems while the ship hid in the shadow of a dead moon. "Captain, you need to see this," she said finally, her voice shaking. The database contained thousands of files about humans, military reports, scientific studies, cultural analyses, but these weren't respectful academic papers. They read like reports about dangerous animals. "Subject species displays unpredictable aggression patterns," one report said. "Recommend containment rather than engagement." Another file was even worse. Human military doctrine prioritizes individual survival over strategic objectives. This makes them extremely difficult to predict or defeat. Suggest maintaining current isolation protocols. Minho realized with growing horror that the galaxy wasn't just ignoring humans. They were actively afraid of them. The isolation wasn't protection, it was a prison. They think we're monsters, Yunji said, reading over his shoulder. Yujin pulled up another section of the database. Look at this, Captain. They teach their children about us. The files showed alien children's books with pictures of wild-looking humans attacking peaceful alien settlements. Stories that painted humans as savage warriors who destroyed everything. They touched. Legends that warned young aliens about the dangerous species sleeping in the Sol system. They've turned us into their boogeyman, Minho said grimly. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As Yujin dug deeper into the military files, she found strategic assessments of human capabilities. The aliens had been studying old human battle records for thousands of years, trying to understand how such a primitive species had caused so much damage. Look at this analysis, Yujin said, pointing to a detailed report. They're terrified of how we think. They say human tactics don't make sense because we value individual lives over military objectives. Minho read the report carefully. The aliens couldn't understand why humans would risk entire battles to save wounded soldiers. They were confused by human loyalty to their teammates. They found human creativity in combat to be unpredictable and dangerous. They fight wars like chess games, Minho realized. Move pieces around the board, sacrifice what you need to win. But humans, we don't abandon our people. We turn garbage into weapons. We keep fighting even when we can't win. The crew of the Rising Dawn spent 2 more weeks gathering intelligence before returning to Earth. They had documented dozens of stolen human worlds, recorded hundreds of hours of alien communications, and collected enough evidence to prove that humanity had been deliberately isolated and forgotten. When they finally transmitted their report back to Earth, Minho knew it would change everything. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years believing that humans were contained and harmless. They had built their entire peaceful civilization on the assumption that the dangerous species from Sol would never wake up. But humans were awake now, and they were very, very angry. The galaxy was about to learn that some sleeping giants should never have been disturbed. Admiral Kyung-Soo stood on the bridge of the Earth's Voice as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Vexari territory. 50 human ships materialized from nothing, their stealth systems shutting down simultaneously. The alien patrol ships in the area immediately began broadcasting panic signals. This is Admiral Kyung-Soo of the Earth Diplomatic Fleet, he announced on all frequencies. We request immediate communication with the Galactic Council regarding territorial violations and reparations for stolen human worlds. On the Vexari command ship, Captain Zethka stared at his sensors in disbelief. The human ships had appeared without warning, using technology that his scanners couldn't even detect properly. His hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication. System, alert Proxima Station, he told his communications officer. The humans are back. Send the old war codes. Tell them it's really happening. Within hours, emergency sessions were being called across the galaxy. On Proxima Station, Council Leader Jae-sung stood before the assembled representatives with the most serious expression anyone had seen in centuries. Fellow beings, he began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. The Sol prohibition has been broken. Human ships are operating in galactic space for the first time in 3,000 years. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began shouting at once. Some demanded immediate military action. Others suggested trying to negotiate. A few species that remembered the old wars simply got up and left to prepare their home defenses. Elder Counselor Haiwan, one of the few beings old enough to remember stories from the human wars, stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent out of respect for her age. You young ones don't understand, she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Our entire civilization was built on their absence. Every trade route we use passes through former human territory. Every resource allocation we've made depends on access to their old colonies. Every peace treaty we've signed specifically excluded human space from negotiations. She paused and looked around the chamber. We didn't just forget about humans. We built our whole way of life on the assumption that they would never come back. In the military command center below the council chambers, General Tako was reviewing ancient battle plans that hadn't been updated in millennia. The files made for terrifying reading. Humans who turned civilian ships into bombs. Human soldiers who fought to the death rather than surrender. Human fleets that won battles they should have lost through pure stubborn determination. "Sir," reported his aide, Major Sujin, "the human fleet is broadcasting their demands on all channels. They want full disclosure of all actions taken in former human territory, reparations for appropriated worlds, and immediate recognition as an equal member of galactic civilization." General Tako studied the tactical displays showing human ship positions. "How many ships do they have?" "Unknown, sir. These 50 appeared from nowhere. There could be thousands more hiding with the same stealth technology." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Wu Jin was meeting with his military advisors. The reports from Admiral Kyung-soo were being broadcast live to the entire planet. Billions of humans watched as their representatives demanded answers from the species that had stolen their worlds. "The Galactic Council is in emergency session," reported Defense Minister Min Jung. "Our intelligence suggests they're divided between those who want to fight and those who want to negotiate." President Wu Jin nodded grimly. "And what do our analysts think they'll choose?" "Based on their response patterns, they're more likely to choose conflict. They're afraid that accepting our demands will collapse their entire political system." Back at Proxima Station, the council had been debating for 6 hours without reaching any agreement. Some species, like the militant Karathi, were pushing for immediate preemptive strikes against Earth before humanity could fully mobilize their forces. "Strike now while we still have the advantage," declared war leader Vex-2 of the Karathi fleet. "The humans are few in number. If we attack their homeworld immediately, we can end this before it begins." But other species weren't so sure. The Altari representative, Scholar Yinlo, had been studying the old war records all day. "The historical data suggests that attacking humans directly only makes them more dangerous," she warned. "Every species that tried to conquer human worlds lost more ships than they destroyed. Human defensive tactics are unusual." Council leader Jae-sung finally called for order. "We need to make a decision. The human fleet is waiting for our response, and every hour we delay makes us look weaker." The vote was closer than anyone expected. By a narrow margin, the council chose to reject the human demands. They would offer limited trade agreements and cultural exchanges, but they would not admit to wrongdoing or provide reparations. "We cannot allow an unstable element to disrupt 3,000 years of peace," Jae-sung announced. "Some prices are too high to pay." When Admiral Kyung-soo received the council's response, he transmitted it back to Earth immediately. President Wu Jin read the rejection to the Global Assembly, and the reaction was swift and unanimous. "They refuse to acknowledge what they've done," the president said calmly. "They refuse to return what they've stolen. They refuse to treat us as equals." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "Very well. They've chosen to learn about humanity the hard way." But what happened next wasn't what the galaxy expected. There were no declarations of war, no massive fleet movements, no threats of destruction. Instead, something far more subtle and terrifying began. The humans had learned patience during their long isolation, and they were about to teach the galaxy that there were worse things than war. 6 months after the first human ships appeared in galactic space, Captain Sujin walked through the corridors of what used to be the Galactic Council headquarters. The building was the same, but everything else had changed completely. Where, once only the powerful species had offices, now dozens of smaller worlds had representatives working together. "The Altari delegation is here to see you," announced her aide, Lieutenant Dongwu. "They want to discuss the new trade agreements." Sujin smiled. The Altari had been one of the first species to switch sides when they realized what humans were really offering. Not conquest or domination, but something much more dangerous to the old system: fairness. It had started small. Human ships began appearing at worlds that had been ignored by the old council. places where smaller species struggled under heavy taxes and unfair trade rules. The humans didn't bring weapons or threats. Instead, they brought gifts. Advanced water purification systems for desert worlds, medical technology that could cure diseases the Council had ignored for centuries, agricultural methods that could feed populations the old system had let starve. "We're not here to rule anyone," Captain Sujin had told the first group of desperate planetary leaders. "We're here to help you rule yourselves." The effect was immediate and devastating to the old power structure. When the Council tried to punish worlds for working with humans, those worlds simply stopped following Council orders. When the Council tried to cut off trade, the humans provided better alternatives. Engineer Minjung had become something of a legend among the smaller worlds. She traveled from system to system, teaching alien engineers how to build the machines they needed instead of buying them from Council-approved corporations. "Knowledge should be free," she would tell crowds of eager students. "If you know how to build something yourself, no one can control you by taking it away." The economic effects spread faster than anyone expected. Worlds that had been poor under the old system suddenly became wealthy. Species that had been dependent on Council handouts learned to stand on their own. The careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy peaceful began to crumble. On Proxima Station, former Council leader Jae Sung watched his political empire collapse from his empty office. Most of the Council representatives had already left to negotiate separate deals with their human-supported populations. "How did they do it?" he asked his remaining aide. "They never fired a shot. They never conquered a single world. How did they destroy everything we built?" The aide, a young diplomat named Heerin, had been studying human tactics for months. "They didn't destroy anything, sir. They just showed people that there was a better way to live." That was the terrifying truth that the old Council had finally understood too late. Humans hadn't returned to the galaxy as conquerors. They had returned as teachers, and their lessons were more dangerous than any weapon. The breaking point came when the humans revealed the full truth about the old colonies. Using documentation gathered during their reconnaissance missions, they showed the galaxy exactly what had been stolen and by whom. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. President Young Hee addressed the new Galactic Federation from the rebuilt chambers on Proxima Station. The room was twice as large as before, with representatives from hundreds of worlds that had never been allowed to participate in galactic government. "We didn't return to punish anyone," she said, looking directly at the former Council members who had chosen to stay. "We returned because we learned something during our 3,000 years of isolation. True peace cannot exist when some people are free and others are not." The transformation hadn't been completely peaceful. A few of the old military powers had tried to fight back. The Karathi had launched attacks on human-allied worlds, expecting easy victories against primitive human technology. They were wrong. The humans who fought back were nothing like the desperate warriors from the old stories. These humans fought with precision and purpose, using tactics that the Karathi had never seen before. Instead of destroying Karathi ships, they disabled them and broadcast the crew's surrender across the galaxy. "We don't want to kill you," Admiral Kyung-soo had told the captured Karathi commanders. "We want you to understand that fighting us is pointless. We're not your enemy. Your real enemy is the system that told you this war was necessary." Within weeks, Karathi soldiers were defecting to join the human-led coalition. They had discovered that humans treated prisoners better than their own government treated citizens. The old galaxy had been held together by fear and control. The new federation was built on cooperation and mutual benefit. Worlds contributed what they could and received what they needed. Technology was shared freely. No one species dominated the others. Dr. So Young, who had started the awakening by detecting the first alien presence in human space, now worked in a research station orbiting New Geneva, a world that had been jointly terraformed by 6 different species working together. Looking out at the ships passing by, human vessels working alongside alien craft, carrying goods and people between worlds that had once been enemies, she marveled at how quickly everything had changed. The galaxy had feared that waking the humans would bring war and destruction. Instead, it had brought something much more revolutionary: the idea that everyone deserved to be free. The old order was gone forever. In its place was something that had never existed before: true galactic peace.